But here's the thing. Any leader, anyone listening that's in a leadership role, and I consider senior members leaders as well, look in the mirror and say, are you doing everything you can do to make yourself understand human nature?
We will link together as one force, continuing to serve always. This is the Brotherhood Academy Radio Podcast.
Volunteer firefighters, fight for a dying breed. Brotherhood Academy, Brotherhood Academy Radio.
Hey everyone, Rusty Ricker, New England Fools, letting you know about some of our upcoming events for 2020. February 9th, Sunday, 1400 hours, the West Kennebunk Fire Station. We have our Tactical Tutelage Tour with Portsmouth Fire Medic Tim Griswold. March, weekend of the 6th to the 8th, at the Village by the Sea in Wells, Maine, we have our annual winter conference, the Northeastern Fire Summit. Some of the best instructors we've had yet right here in your backyard. Also on tap, we have our annual Fire Buff Photo Night coming in the 28th of March in Georgetown, Mass. And bringing back Spring Training Hands-On event will be up in Topsom, Maine, the weekend of April 3rd to the 5th for some Northeast Truckin' Hands-On. You can check us out on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at New England Fools, or go to our website, nefools.org.
Okay, welcome back, everybody, to the Brotherhood Academy Radio Podcast. I am Nick Hilton, and I am here today with the full team once again. I have Paul Balentine and Nick Hamel.
Good morning.
And we have a guest on the show we'll introduce after we do some quick announcements. First, we want to dive into the Down to Fight Fire Volunteer Firefighters podcast, the boys out of Canada. We give them weapons. We give them a lot of love, and they give us a lot of love back. They are a group of volunteer firefighters on the western coast of Canada, and they are very active on all social media platforms. They do an episode every Monday. They have launched on all the platforms for podcasts, the Down to Fight Fire Volunteer Firefighters podcast. We love to give them hell, and they give us hell back. And they're seeing results by our love, and we're seeing results from their love. And they're actually sharing different screenshots of people who are messaging them saying that they heard about them through us. So I think that's really cool. So be sure to check those guys out, the DTFF, Down to Fight Fire Volunteer Firefighters podcast out of Canada. Next up is the New England Fools Northeastern Fire Summit, March 6th through 8th. You heard the commercial that Rusty Ricker did just before we started the show here. And please check out his information, his websites, please, because this is a really, really good event. At least this one is. We'll be there. We'll have our table set up with our mics and all that stuff, and we'll be doing interviews. So March 6th through 8th in Wells, Maine, the Northeastern Fire Summit put on by the New England Fools. And finally, training ideas. As always, please get on our website. Please click on the link for your training ideas. Submit those so that we can get everybody on board with really, really cool training stuff. So that's it. Quick announcements. Let's get into it because we have a really good guest on today. His name is Tom Merrill, and he is a 37-year fire department veteran. He's the host of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department podcast with Fire Engineering. If you haven't heard of that, go on there and check that out. And as well as the author of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department articles series featured in Fire Engineering. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. It's nice. I've listened to a lot of your shows, and it's nice to be invited to be on. I appreciate it.
We appreciate that. We appreciate the support. So tell us a little bit about you and your history with the fire service.
Well, it's funny because just last week I was reminded as to really what got me involved, because last week was the 48th anniversary of the premiere of Emergency. And and I can date myself a little bit because I remember watching the original episodes on Saturday nights at 8 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And I was hooked. And really took an interest in my local fire department at the time. And lo and behold, a few years later, life got in the way, and I kind of forgot about how much I loved the fire service by watching Emergency. And one day I'm working at a supermarket in town, and I'm going to college, and guy standing next to me has one of those original Motorola Minutors on his belt, and I started asking him what that was, and he's like, "Oh, that's a pager radio for fire calls. I'm a volunteer firefighter." And he looked at me and said, "Why don't you join?" And I really hadn't given it thought because, like I said, life had gotten in the way, going to college and doing other things. But I said, what the heck? So at 19 years of age, I joined my local fire department in my hometown in Snyder, New York, which is just outside of Buffalo, and never knew the journey it would lead me on. And 37 years later, I spent 10 years as a captain, 15 years in the chief officer ranks, and now I'm what they call a fire commissioner. We have 5 commissioners that govern our department. It's like a political subdivision of the state of New York. And that was like the natural progression for past chiefs. So I'm now in that role. And it's been one heck of a ride. And I loved every minute of it.
Awesome. I feel like a lot of people join the fire service because of emergency. Like I hear that from so many, more senior members that show. It's almost like they need to get a new show out, right?
Yeah.
To inspire some new younger people to start joining the fire departments too.
Yeah, they rescued me in Chicago Fire.
Yeah, but those do those count though? It's not the same.
No, it's not.
In my opinion, there hasn't been a show as, in just my opinion, as good as Emergencies. There's too much dysfunction in some of the other shows.
Yeah, drama.
We agree.
Too much drama, too much dysfunction, and Emergency. That was it for me. That really sparked my interest.
Yeah.
So I watched that as a. My mother couldn't get me to sit down and watch Sesame Street as a kid. By the time I was a kid in the early '80s, it was all on reruns. So Sesame Street was kind of a no-go for me, but once in a while, by that time, reruns were on of Emergency, and that she could get me to sit down and watch, and for hours on end. And obviously, there was only ever one thing I was going to do, but so I really didn't need Emergency to steer me there. But certainly, I can relate to watching Emergency growing up as well.
Oh yeah.
Awesome.
Matter of fact, a funny story. Somebody wrote in my 6th grade yearbook. I still have it. Someone, when you know how you sign yearbooks at the end of the year,
right?
Somebody wrote in my 6th grade yearbook, "I hope you become just like Johnny Gage someday." And I still have it.
Followed by "Have a nice summer," right? That's what everybody puts.
Exactly. It was great being in your class.
Exactly. So tell us the premise of the professional volunteer fire department and how you got that started, because it's a huge thing you've got going on, and it's full of value.
I appreciate that. I really do. And again, just like with my fire service journey, I never expected this to take off like it did. So if you really want to hear the story, I'll be happy to share it with you.
Yeah, please do.
So my department, we're fortunate in our area. We're very well financed, very well run departments. And we enjoy a robust training budget, and we're able to travel quite a bit for training. And the big conference for us every year is FDIC. We send 10 members every year to FDIC.
Nice.
Matter of fact, I think we might have 11 this coming year, but we have 10 or 11. And I would say fully 80-90% of our procedures that we have learned in the decades that I've been in, and even before I joined, have been picked up at these conferences, especially FDIC. We charge our officers with, hey, we're going to pay your way. You're going to have the best experience ever. You will put your butt in class every morning. You can do whatever you want at night, but you will be in class, and you will learn, and you will bring back. We charge them with coming back and putting on drills based on what they learn. So I would go every year to FDIC, and we started running across Bobby Halton, who, for those who don't know, is the editor, training director, and FDIC director, and everyone knows him. He's America's firefighter. And Bobby Halton is the type of man who would never forget a face. And every year he would see us and make small talk with us, and then he'd go on his way. Well, one year in our small talk, we found out his wife was from Buffalo. Holy cow, his wife's from Buffalo.
Small world.
It's a very small world. So now we had a connection. One day I'm reading the newspaper at home, and I see that his father-in-law, his wife's father, passed away. And I said to my wife, I'm going to run to this wake. Do you think he'd be mad? And my wife looked at me and goes, Tom, who would ever be mad for going to, a loved one's wake?
Sure.
So I buzzed into the wake, and Bobby's there. He remembers me. We go off into the corner in the funeral home, and what do we do as firefighters?
We talk shop.
Fire, right?
Stuff.
Exactly. We're talking shop, and we're at a funeral home at a wake for his father-in-law. We're talking shop, and he says to me, why don't you write some articles? And I'm thinking, I had just gotten out as chief. I was kind of looking for something to do, but this had never occurred to me. And I looked at him and I said, I was just a chief of my little volunteer fire department. What the heck am I going to write about that would mean anything to anyone out there? You know, and he goes, well, you give it some thought and you send me some articles and I'll be happy to see if I can get them published for you. Now, at the same time that this happened, my fire department, for my outgoing banquet, you know how you do chief installation dinners, my last dinner, they flew in as a surprise to me, Chief John Salka from the FDNY.
Wow.
Because I was always quoting Chief Salka as I was going through the chief ranks. I was reviewing articles he wrote and put them on the bulletin board. So the guys and gals thought it would be a great idea as a surprise to me for my outgoing chief's installation dinner to have him show up. And
No
boy,
kidding.
did they catch me off guard. And that was awesome.
That's
and
impressive.
Chief Salka,
Wow.
yeah, that was I'll never forget that. And Chief Salka, just like Bobby Halton, said to me, he heard me give a speech at the conference, at the installation banquet, and he goes, you should do some presentations. And I'm like, again, I was the chief of my little volunteer fire department. What am I going to do? So I had these two fire service icons pushing me to do something.
Wow.
And one day, as I thought about it for the next week or two, one day it just dawned on me about this whole professional volunteer idea. So I started writing my premier article, The Professional Volunteer Fire Department, got it published in Fire Engineering with the help of Chief Salka and Chief Halton. And then I started thinking of other parts to the series and said, would you mind if I send a few more parts in? And they said, no, do it. It's up to 35 parts now.
Wow.
Penwell, who is a publishing company that used to be in charge of fire engineering, they now have offered me a contract to write a book, The Professional Volunteer Fire Department. So
No
I'm working
kidding.
on that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's exciting.
That's a lot of work.
And then it is. I'm actually way behind on it, and I'm waiting for a phone call to say, we're going to tear that contract up because we're not getting all that. But then as all this was going on, Chief Halton then says, put a presentation together based on your articles. And again, I'm like, I have been going to FDIC for years, and as you well know, that is the premier fire service event.
Oh, sure.
I'm like, there is no way they're going to accept me to teach at FDIC. But I put a presentation together, made a application. They accepted it, and I figured this is great. And I thought maybe 1 year, and then the reviews would come in, and that would be it. I wouldn't be invited back. Well, proud to announce, I'll be going for my 7th year in a row teaching the Professional Volunteer Fire Department.
That's
Fantastic.
impressive.
So
Congratulations
Yeah.
on that.
Thank you. Very happy. And I know you guys have talked about going to FDIC. I've heard you talk about it on your show.
Yeah,
You
have.
got to go. You
Yep.
got to get there. You'll never not want to miss it once you go once.
We saw all the podcasters and all the the fire service influencers that you have on social media now. They were all out there last year, and I was like, I want to be there.
What does
Like,
Chief
so much fun.
Lasky? What does Chief Rick Lasky call it? It's Disney. It's the Disney World of firefighting.
Yeah, sure, sure.
I thought that was
believe
Pierce.
it. Close enough. That's great. So you're going to be out there again this year.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. So let's jump into this. The Professional Volunteer Fire Department. What is your definition? Because we've touched on this quite a bit ourselves, but I'm interested to hear yours. What's your definition of a professional firefighter?
Well, I could talk all day about that, and it's funny because there's some naysayers out there. There are some people, as you well know, I'm sure you get it here and there. There's some people out there that are tearing our fire service up, and
Absolutely.
And my idea, my simple idea was this: hey, look at the end of the day, our residents are due professional service delivered by professional firefighters representing professional organizations. Now, there's a lot of definitions for professional.
Sure.
And I have several in my presentation, and there's a lot of them that don't say anything about earning a paycheck.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
It has to do with competency. It has to do with treating people right. And when I say treating people right, I mean, yes, the citizens and the public that we serve, but also our own members. The bullying and in some cases harassment that goes on in some of the volunteer firehouses, that's not professional. That's anything but.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
So It's how you treat people. It's how you train. It's how you uphold the honor and integrity that's associated with our title, firefighter. And I just like to tell people that delivering, maintaining, and upholding a professional reputation, however you define it, is the duty of all firefighters, paid or volunteer. And there's some departments out there that are paid that are probably nothing like a professional department. And there's a lot of volunteer departments out there that are absolutely stellar professional operations. We need to get, what's the old saying? Fires don't care if those putting it out are getting paid to do it or volunteering.
Right.
No, you're right. It's all about delivering a competent service with competent people.
Yeah, the fires don't burn any hotter in a career city.
Oh, yeah, I know some paid guys that would believe that they do. Tom, I'm really glad that your title resonates with me because I'm a two-hatter. So I represent the paid career ranks and I represent the volunteer ranks, and there's nothing that irks me more than when somebody in my capacity as a paid firefighter will they reference us. Well, we're professional firefighters. I'm like, based on what? The paycheck? Because I work with a bunch of volunteers in my hometown that are highly skilled professionals, and to me, professionalism doesn't come with a paycheck. To call somebody that's a paid firefighter a professional firefighter in comparison to somebody who doesn't collect a paycheck, to me is ludicrous, because the reality is that, do I provide a different service at home than I do when I'm at my full-time job? To me, I'm doing the same job.
Right.
How is that any different?
Right.
And you refer to us as different names. And so to me, professionalism to me is a mindset and attitude, and not a compensation status. So your title resonates with me.
Yeah, for sure. Professionalism is not defined by a paycheck. Absolutely not. And I get mad when I see poor behavior or poor performance by anybody, paid or volunteer. It's all about striving to be the best you can be and delivering the best possible service. And also, like I said, inside the firehouse too. And I know you guys have focused a lot on, and it's actually a presentation I'm putting together right now about improving morale in the volunteer firehouse.
Yeah,
because
it's important.
That's part of it too. You got to, I always say, make it a firehouse. You want it to be like a home where you feel safe and secure and warm and comfortable, and you're not afraid to go there. And that's what we want. We want people to enjoy being at our firehouse, especially in the volunteer ranks. My gosh,
right.
We want them to hang out there.
Of course,
retention.
The trucks get on the road quicker if you got guys on the station hanging around. Your response times are going to improve.
Absolutely,
and that's
Absolutely.
good for morale as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can remember when we first started out, when we were younger, Paul, back before we had real responsibilities in life. We were at the firehouse every day, and I'm sure Hamel was the same.
Yeah, we were there every day at some point.
I lived next door pre-kids.
Yeah.
Right.
Then kids came.
Every Saturday we were there, and we spent the whole day, and we had 2 full engine companies.
Yeah, Saturday was a sacred day at the firehouse, and now we just don't have time for that between full-time jobs and wives and kids and 100
I don't know how I did. I have 4 daughters, and when I started out as an assistant chief, I had one daughter who was only a couple years old, and by the time I got out as chief, I had 4 daughters. And
oh my goodness!
They were graduating. Some were graduating from high school, and it was like in the blink of an eye. It flew by. Because the way we do things, as most volunteer fire companies, we do have the dreaded volunteer fire department election, and
we can remember that as kids.
Even our chiefs are elected, and we term out. You get elected every year, but the maximum our chief can serve is 5 years. And so you do, since 1982, it's worked out where we have a second assistant chief, a first assistant chief, and a chief. And since 1982, they've all gone 5 terms. So I did 5 years as second assistant, 5 years as first assistant, and then 5 years as chief. So it was 15 full years in the chief ranks, which is good for continuity. It's good for succession planning and succession management. But when you get out after 15 years, your wife or your spouse is pretty happy.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So you guys said in your fire department, you had one of your former fire chiefs write a book, Robert Drexelius.
Oh,
Is that how
yeah.
you pronounce that?
Drex. We call him Drex. Yeah. He He's quite a man. He lives down in the South now. He was still active when I joined, and did a lot of innovative things. I'll tell you one thing we're proud of with the Snyder Fire Department, and I'm 99% sure this is an accurate thing. So in line with emergency, which came out in the early 70s, as you know, the Snyder Fire Department launched volunteer paramedic ambulance service out of our department. In 1973, we had 42 certified Snyder firefighter paramedics.
Wow.
We were the first volunteer fire department paramedic program in the United States. And I dare say we had paramedics in our little town of Snyder, our little hamlet of Snyder, which is in the town of Amherst, New York. We had paramedics before New York City, I'm pretty sure.
Wow.
Pretty amazing.
What was the motivating factor behind that?
Okay, the story I heard, and I could be wrong, someone might be listening that knows the story a little better than me. One of the companies that invented or perfected or had something to do with the defibrillator is here in the Buffalo area. I believe it was called Wilson Great Batch or something like that. It's probably in the book that Dreck wrote. But anyway, one of our volunteers worked at that company.
Oh, wow.
And happened to be talking about this new defibrillator program and the paramedic program that it was going to be designed for. And our leaders at the time contacted medical people in our area and said, what does it take to be paramedics? And they launched a program, and in a 6-month period, they trained 42 of our members. And it's one of our proudest moments. And we still offer paramedic service to our residents, but our call volume spiked so much that in 1985, we did away with our paramedic ambulance, and we went down to first responder mode, but we have a paid ambulance service, provide the paramedics, and go on all the calls with us. So they do the transporting. We don't transport at all anymore because we were running, back in the 70s, we started running 1,200 runs a year, and it was just getting too much.
Wow. Wow.
So
that's crazy. That's interesting, though.
Yeah, I'm ashamed I don't know the story better, but that's the gist of it. There was one of our volunteers that worked in a medical device company that was working on a defibrillator and started talking about it, and they did the research and got a hold of some local doctors and nurses who put on the paramedic course for it.
Wow, that's pretty neat.
I mean, it makes sense. You have a little bit of in-house influence, and somebody is strong with something, and they created a program, which I think is a great thing that fire department should be taking advantage of. And that's something we talk about a lot is finding the strengths in your members and encourage them to come up with a program. So.
And that Chief Drexilius, who wrote the book, he's in his 80s now. He lives down, I think it's South Carolina. He comes in every year for our installation banquet.
Wow.
And we catch up, and we still, what's important too, and I know you guys will agree with this. You know what? When I was chief, he came to one of our monthly, we have the department meeting once a month. When I did the chief's report, I had him stand up because we had a lot of people in the room that they don't know him. They don't know who he is.
Of course not.
Still important that they learn who he was and what he did. And then we still all call him chief. Even I made sure our young new members, this is Chief Robert Drexilius. He's a chief. Once a chief, always a chief. Mm-hmm. And that is one way to help build morale, especially with your senior crowd that maybe used to serve as chiefs. That helps.
Yeah, we do that. We keep our members that were chiefs have the Class A still with the white hat and their bugles. So
yeah,
that's
one thing that always irks me is, and not so much on the company officer ranks, but chief officer ranks. They deserve to be addressed as chief. And it's hard, when you've grown up with all these people and you've known them for your whole life and this and that. Sometimes it gets a little less formal, but I don't know. I always try to keep that decorum when at all possible.
Especially when the chief's your dad.
Yeah, that's no picnic, I can tell you that.
So, what does professionalism, how does that tie into retention? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, it can certainly help with recruitment. I always like to say, and one of the things I say in my presentation, which I have a professional volunteer presentation, one I do at FDIC, which is a 4-hour presentation. I also have it available in 2 and 3 because there's so much to talk about. I have 12 main areas I key in on, including recruitment and retention. But I start with recruitment by saying, who wants to join an organization if it looks like it's a bunch of buffoons or a bunch of fools and they're acting goofy and foolish when they're out in the public? So It's always important to exude that professional look whenever you're wearing that Maltese cross, or even when you're not wearing the Maltese cross, because let's face it, your neighbors and friends of friends, they know you're a firefighter.
Right.
So if you look and act professional, they might say to themselves, hey, that looks like a good organization, a well-run organization. I want to be part of that.
Yeah. I think
and then when you...
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think there's a stigma with the volunteer firefighters across the country where many people may think that we're just a bunch of like hillbillies driving pickup trucks and hanging out at the firehouse. You know what I mean? And there's that, maybe an unprofessional look at that. And I think that that's what maybe turns some people off and think that maybe they don't even belong in an organization like that. And I think that that's something that we should be working on changing.
No, absolutely. And then, so then you get them, and you want to, hooking them is one thing. Getting them in and then keeping them obviously is another. But once you get them, and how does professionalism help keep them? Well, I always say you have a well-run ship. You got your ship in order at the firehouse. In other words, the way you bring them in. Think of a job. You ever start a job where you get there and there's no direction being provided or no information being given to you? Well, it's the same in our volunteer firehouse. The day of throwing gear at somebody and saying, okay, just start going to calls, you'll learn as you go, is over. So I like to put together a nice orientation program where you welcome people, you have whatever paperwork maybe they need to fill out for a key or whatever it is, insurance paperwork, you have it in a folder, it's ready to go. You're saying to them, we were waiting for you. We thank you for being here. And it just continues from there through the career. When it's time for training, the training is organized and ready to go. If they have to take outside training classes, you're helping them with the paperwork. And it's just a well put together machine. And I like to point out, too, on both sides of the aisle. We talk so much in the volunteer fire service about the firematic or operations side. Well, the administrative side has to have their ship in order too. And all those working together, like the gears in a wheel meshing together, that it's a smooth operating machine, and it sells the professional image. And here's the other thing. It's an image that's felt by the member, but if we're doing it right, it's also felt by the community served. And that's the goal.
Yeah. No, I agree. And it's funny because Paul and I just had a conversation pretty similar to that the other night about, how some of our officers are very strong in the operations and tactical version of the fire department, and some of us are very strong in the administration. And that's very important to have that, both of those skills within your organization, right?
Yes. And it's also important that we recognize, hey, not everyone that comes through that front door is going to want to be taking that hose line down a dark, smoky hallway. You do. I do. But there's a lot of people that, right? Am I right?
That's what I live for. I live for it.
So, right. But you're thinking of people right now that would never do that.
We have some people,
Yeah, they can still bring value to your organization. And it's a team.
We have people that we have a person that's in our department. Maine is a Department of Labor / OSHA state, and so we're mandated to possess the same paperwork and paper trail that like any place of employment would have. So, they get really into the nitty gritty of paperwork and OSHA compliance and all that stuff, and it's really been tough for the volunteer fire departments in Maine to keep up with all of that. And it's something that I could care less about. Give me a crew and give me a hose line, and we'll push down a hallway, and that's to me is like more fun than anything I can think of. But to me, to organize papers into a huge notebook so that when the Department of Labor / OSHA comes banging on the door, that to me is like I'd rather be stabbed in the eyeballs. So we have somebody that does that for us, and she does a really good job, and she's way better organized because that's not my area of expertise. So but she doesn't want to crawl down smoky hallways, so it takes all kinds. We have to embrace what we can get.
It's a small business. It really is. It's actually a medium-sized business.
Yeah, it definitely is.
And that's another thing that I like to talk about, too. It's something you don't think about, but there are life lessons to be learned when you join your volunteer firehouse. And even if you only stay for a short period of time, you can carry those lessons wherever you go in life. One of them how many times have you heard this? Because we've all heard this, right? Same circus, different clowns.
Oh,
right?
for
That's
sure.
the old saying, right? How many times have you heard all the damn Can we swear on this show? Sorry. This darn
okay.
volunteer fire department, the politics, the
the
politics, right?
Drama.
Right.
It's awful.
But here's my answer. I said, my wife was the president of the PTA. My wife was in Girl Scouts. You want to talk politics?
Little League.
You're not going to get away from it. It's everywhere you go in life, and you've got to learn how to work with people. Yes, you've got to learn how to be political. You do. It's part of wherever you're going to go in life. You're going to interview for a promotion someday. You might have to go into a boardroom and talk to a group of people. Whatever you're going to do, it's going to be political. It's just life, and you got to learn how to work. You got to learn how to work it.
Unfortunately, unfortunately,
Well, Paul's dealt with the political side of things for promotions. That's for sure.
I hit a nerve. I'm sorry.
No, not at all. I've been promoted twice in my full-time career, and I've been through the professional. Paid career, paid side of the promotional processes, and it's been a nightmare on a couple different occasions. But
it's everywhere.
They wow, yeah. So no, you didn't hit a nerve at all, and we do occasionally let a swear slip on the show here, so
it happens.
Okay.
Definitely. We are firefighters, and so we're on like our best behavior, because we definitely don't talk this nice around the firehouse, because it's just, let's face it, it's a firehouse, but
just the way it is.
But so if one flies out, it's no big deal. I'm the worst offender, so but I'm good on the show, because obviously we're reaching far and wide, so I'm careful.
But on the same token, it's our show, and we can do what we want. You know what I mean?
True.
So.
Hey, that it reminds me of a story, if I could, and it's a story that happened right around the time I was writing my first article. So we're on our way to FDIC, and we usually always wear our job shirts on the airplane, and it's the interaction with the flight crews is amazing, because as you get closer to, depending on how many stops you make, as you get closer to Indianapolis, when the stop that's closest, your last leg of the journey,
you're running
there's
into
usually
guys.
more.
Yeah,
there's firefighters from all over. And eventually, there's like 3/4 of the flight. There's firefighters, and the flight crews love it. We all have a good time.
Yeah.
And however, people are watching.
Yeah, of course.
And one day we're at the airport, and we all have our job shirts on, and there's another group of firefighters standing by the window. I'll never forget this. And every other word. Well, first of all, we had young kids there watching us and goofing around with us and talking to us. And I saw a mother start off the whole conversation by pointing at us, saying, Hey, little Joey or little Jane, you see that? Those are all firefighters. Look at that, firefighters. And we wave and smile and all that. Well, there's another group of firefighters over by the window, and every other word out of their mouth was the F-bomb.
Yeah.
They didn't know, even if the family was looking at them. They didn't know we were looking at. They were just talking like you and we are right now, just everyday conversation. But every other word was the F word.
You forget you're not in the firehouse.
Yeah, exactly.
The firehouse is a safe place.
That's right.
and we catch ourselves every now and then, but luckily, I mean, they're sick of past Chief Merrill or Commissioner Merrill being there, because I'm always reminding them, hey, guys, remember.
So I'm always telling guys, either at work or at home with the volunteers, hey, watch your mouth, and everybody looks at me funny. They're like, you're the worst offender, and I'm like, so listen. So I say this as much for your benefit as I do for my own, because when I say it out loud to watch your mouth, it helps to remind me. So that's what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
What?
And I'm our fire department historian, and I've actually read all of our department minutes. Our firehouse goes back to 1916, and I've read our minutes. And,
shit.
Wow. Yeah, and every now and then, even in the 30s and that, there was a reminder, and I picture it's usually a 70 or 80-year-old
swear jar
reminding, hey, you gotta watch your language. So this has been an age-old issue
Yeah,
in
it
our
is.
volunteer fire service.
You know what, Tom? I think we're going to have to hook up sometime and have some beers, sit down with some beers, because you're talking to Paul Balentine, who is our department historian, who happens to have all of our minutes, and our department was formed in 1916 as well.
Yeah.
So-
that's awesome.
Yeah, I did.
Departments are babies.
yeah, right?
For our 100th anniversary, Nick and I were co-chairs for the 100th anniversary committee. So about 4 or 5 years in advance of that, I was made aware that the all the minutes of our meetings were kept in the firehouse in a closet somewhere that I didn't know was there. So I actually was able to take that stuff home and read all of it, and I started writing notes in a Word document.
That's a subject for another show.
Yeah,
We'll talk all about preserving our history.
I ended up I'm at about 80 some odd typed pages, and I have about I have an external hard drive that the department bought, and it's in my possession, but it all belongs to the department.
That's fantastic.
We're somewhere in the neighborhood of 4,000 photos and about 80 some odd typed pages of just blurbs I was able to take out of all the minutes of the meetings, town reports, and anything that my father's the fire chief right now. He's been chief since '85, and my grandfather was a member, and my great-grandfather was a member. So I have a lot of family history there, and I was able to get some stuff from my grandfather, who's 87 now. Stuff that, like I'd read something in the minutes of the meetings, and I'd go ask my grandfather about it. Hey, what about this or what about that? And he was often able to clarify things that I would find in the meeting minutes. What about this? And he would say, oh, well, this is how that happened, or this is how this is that fire. I had a picture of a fire that I got, and I unearthed this, and it had no details, and I called my father and described him the picture, and he said, call your grandfather, because he might have an idea about it. And I called my grandfather. I described it to him. He didn't have a way to look at it on the computer, so I had all the fire records. My father started doing some detective work, and it ended up being one of our past chief's wife's parents' house in the 50s.
Oh, wow.
The house burnt, and so they said, call Fred, because Fred will know about that fire. I think it's Fred's wife's parents' place. So I called him, and Fred was like, yeah, matter of fact, I have the newspaper clipping to go along with the picture you have. And so
fantastic.
A bunch of detective work like that over the course of, it's been 7-8 years now, to put all this history together. And I'm sure you can relate to that if you had
sit him down and get the stories now while he's still with you.
Well,
get them written down.
Yeah, my grandfather still is, but this guy Fred I was telling you about is no longer with us. So we were able to get what we could from him, and then Nick, who's the sitting here for the 100th anniversary, we decided to do a DVD video of our department's 100th anniversary.
Never
and
again.
So Nick did a great job, and we sat down a bunch of these guys. My grandfather, this guy Fred, who both came on in the 50s, and a bunch of the senior members, who I like to call the tribal elders, and we got these guys on video, and a couple of other guys. There were older fellas that are no longer with us, and now we have a 3-hour-long DVD that came out in 2016,
That's awesome.
And we have some of these guys on it that are no longer here, and they told their stories, and they told some old stories, and so the history thing is really near and dear to my heart.
And I would honestly, I say never again, but I would recommend anybody to do that.
I think we should do a version 2. But
No. No.
3 years later.
Yeah, 3 years later.
You know what's so important about preserving history, and I am a total history nut, both American history and fire service history. As a matter of fact, I'm doing actually one of my first big keynote addresses. I'll be out in Nebraska next week doing I like to do leadership training too, and I'm doing a leadership class, but they asked me to keynote this banquet at the Les Lukert Conference next week in Nebraska, and I'm working on my presentation and my keynote. It's all going to be about loving being in the fire service because of our incredible history and heritage and what we need to do. But one thing that is important to remember, the work you're doing now or what you did for your 100th, chances are when you do your 125th or your 150th, nobody's going to double check the work you do. And if you spell someone's name wrong or get a year wrong or something, that's in there forever.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to take what you've done. You guys think about it. 50 years from now, we're all gone. Yeah, exactly. No one's going to double check that. So it's so important. And here's the other thing that's important. My gosh, you got to preserve your history and remember where you came from. In my own department, we had 2 line of duty deaths, one in 1956, one in 1966. Wow. Until we built a new firehouse in 1997, there was nothing up to memorialize or remember our 2 line of duty deaths.
No kidding.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Then we found out, I was always interested to know if we ever lost anyone in World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. So I started doing some research. Now, this is before the internet, okay?
Yeah.
Before the internet.
Actual work.
One day,
yeah, you actually had to go read it in a report somewhere.
Well, I'll make a very long story short. In around the early 2000s, we found that we had a young member we can join at 16 in our department, as that we call them torch boys.
Yep.
That's a historical term.
I remember that term from the book. Yep.
Yeah, it applies to females as well, because we have female torch boys as well, and we put right in our bylaws it's a historical term. We don't mean anything by it.
Sure.
We had a 16-year-old join, and at 19 he goes off into the United States Navy, and in the early days of World War II he was killed in action.
Oh, no.
And it was lost.
Wow.
We never knew it until we found it out in the early 2000s, and I was like, wow, how do we lose this information?
Yeah.
How did we not pass it on through the generations? So now you walk into our firehouse, his picture's up, the story, it's a very heroic story of his destroyer taking on the Japanese fleet in the early days of the war, and it's quite a story. We will never forget John Burgoyne now, because we dug it out, we found it, and we really keep going on. His mother was pregnant with him. Let me think about it. His son was he had a son, and the mother was pregnant with that son when John Burgoyne was killed.
Oh, wow.
And I actually made contact with him via email once I found this out. They were Filipino, and he lived in the Philippines.
Wow.
Great story.
Wow,
Great
that's really cool. That's neat stuff.
That's insane.
It really is. And every firehouse, for the most part, has rich histories and heritage like that need to be preserved and carried on. And it's just, there's so much to be proud of being a firefighter, and things like that should really make you proud.
Yeah,
where you come from.
We've talked about this quite a bit too, and it's holding on to things too. I mean, you don't want to keep everything, right? But you do want to keep some mementos here and there. And it's like we go back to Nick Hamel's story with how they were able to find one of their old fire trucks that they got rid of, that they were replaced back in 2003.
2003, yeah.
Yeah, and they've got that back now. And they're refurbishing it, and they're hooking it up with, old looking equipment and stuff, and it's really
been a great morale project for your department.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And things like that. It's important to show the new members coming in, hey, look at this old truck sitting over here. Here's the story behind this, and have the old guys tell stories about going. We've got a 46 Chevy.
My great grandfather was the captain of it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. We have a 57 Ward LaFrance aerial ladder. It was the first one owned by a volunteer company in our area. And
wow.
We got rid of it in 76, and we tracked it down, and it was owned by the country singer Tanya Tucker. Her father owned it. Okay. And we bought it back from him.
Wow.
Yeah. We bought it back from him, and it needs to be refurbed. It runs. Matter of fact, it's out right now getting a new exhaust system put in, and it's a project. It's going to take years, but we're excited about it.
Oh, that's awesome.
We're excited about it.
That's great for morale.
Yeah, it really is. I wish we could. It really is. We have one truck that's unaccounted for that, we can pretty much find a lot of our trucks when they were retired and where they went, but we got one 59 LaFrance that we cannot find.
We have our 83 American LaFrance in the station still as well. That's out of service, but it's in the we still have it. It runs and drives and pumps. But we had to take it out of service when it was replaced because of the way we worded the Warren article to replace it. But it is in the station and still is a fully functional truck if it was really needed.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, that's where the history thing is near and dear to me. It's really cool to hear that you guys have, a couple of your trucks and you guys have done some digging for your history like we have done here.
It's good to do with the minutes, too, because I don't know how yours are, but ours are getting brittle. First of all, the ones
they
in
are.
the early days, the way the way they used to handwrite them is amazing.
It's
And
really
then
hard
type
to
'em.
it's really
Oh,
hard to follow. Some the cursive is really good, but it's faded in some
Yeah.
cases and hard to read.
One thing we just did last year or 2 years ago now is we sent them out and got them all scanned. They're all digitally
Oh.
preserved now.
Hmm.
And now
Wow.
you can type in, as you know, you can search it. You make a PDF searchable. So
Huh.
I can put in Merrill in any meeting I ever spoke at. It'll pop up in the minutes and highlight
Oh,
where
wow.
which
Huh.
minutes I'm in. So that was a neat project, and I'm glad we did it because they were getting, especially the really old ones, were getting very, very brittle.
And it'll pick that up in cursive?
It did.
Oh, wow.
It did.
They
Pretty cool.
Some of our really early ones are missing because the first meeting minute that I have, the first of the meeting minutes I have, they were in August of 1916. They were already they already had picked a chief. They had it was clearly, you can read the minutes and tell that it wasn't the first meeting. So between January, the fire that got us started was in January, the end of January 1916, and then the first meeting is in August that I have record of. But it was clear there was meetings before that. So some of that's obviously lost to history, and we may never ever find out. So I'd really love to see the minutes from that first meeting. Somehow that stuff is gone. I don't know where it went over the years, but
Yeah, we have missing chunks of minutes.
yeah.
When was your department organized, Hamel?
1870. They combined
Wow.
the different mills in town. Each had a fire company. That's how our trucks are all named, the different engine companies.
Oh,
so
that
each
makes sense.
the woolen mill had the Nowichiwanik hose and whatever down the line.
Yeah.
And in around 1870 that they became a department, combined by the town, and then they kind of evolved from there. But
Wow.
has basically stayed the same since.
Huh.
That's
So-
crazy.
So thinking that's 150 years.
Yeah.
this year.
Wow. I think that calls for a party.
I think
think
that
so.
does call for that.
When do we get started?
We love parties.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Great morale booster.
Yeah, they
Great
sure
morale booster.
Yes.
So we have some stuff from 1900s. We have stuff from the 30s. It gets pretty consistent, 50s and 60s. I mean, some of those guys were still around up until a few years ago. So
Yep, sure.
That stuff's pretty solid. In fact, we were just going through some from the 60s the other day to look something up, and kind of the same as your story. We found out we always had a chief that nobody really knew about in the 20s and 30s, and come to find out he had actually fallen off the truck at a fire and was killed.
No
And
kidding.
we found and the only way we found it was our retired chief, well now passed away, had a scrapbook, and there was a tiny little newspaper blurb that was about this chief, and we still don't have a picture of him. That's the one thing we're trying to find, is a picture of him.
Wow.
Had no
Really?
children.
Yeah,
Brother had no children,
Wow.
so we're kind of at a dead end. But
Wow.
it's been kind of fun trying to track him down and try to figure out somehow, some way that, because we have a wall of all the chief's photos, and his is missing. So we're trying to figure out how do we get.
Wow. That's a cool.
yeah,
a cool.
you don't want to
yeah.
forget him.
No, that's awesome.
Huh. No kidding.
Yeah, for sure.
Well,
Hey guys, I found I did pull out on my bookshelf in my office here is that book that Chief Drexilius wrote, and I had the story pretty correct about the paramedic program. We had a member named Ben Wepner, and he worked for a company. It was called Men in Great Batch, which was a Buffalo company. They manufactured medical supplies, including cardiac monitors and defibs. And one day he went up to the chief and said, "Hey, I'd like to go to this conference, or I'd like you to go to this conference with me where they talk all about cardiac monitoring." And they went to Columbus, Ohio, and Columbus had just put a paramedic unit together. And they looked at that, and that was the beginning of our paramedic program in 1972, 73.
Wow.
Pretty cool.
That
Pretty
is
cool stuff.
cool
pretty
stuff,
awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, I know, Tom, you got some family obligations coming up here in a few minutes, so I don't want to keep you too much longer. But where can people find you online?
Okay. I have a Facebook page, the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. As a matter of fact, I'm dying to get to 10,000 likes. I'm like 700 away from 10,000, and I really, really, really would love people to give it a click and a like. And what I do on that Facebook page, the Professional Volunteer Fire Department, is just share all sorts of inspirational quotes and sayings and things that I stumble upon. I read all the time, and I also put links to great articles that are out there about the fire service. I don't get controversial. And can I editorialize for 20 seconds?
Yeah.
One thing that gets me really mad. We talk and we celebrate our great brotherhood and sisterhood all the time, don't we? We talk about how great firefighters are, and we talk about being professional. But what's driving me crazy, and I get so mad, pissed off, is this keyboard warrior type mentality where it's just wrong. Anybody can have a bad day. Hey, look, I'm not saying my department's the best department in the world. We've got A team for sure, but we've got our B and our C players as well, and even our A team.
Every town has some vacant lots.
Right. Oh yeah. We can all stumble, right? We can all fall and stumble and have a bad day at the office. We do not need to be absolutely ripping each other apart on social media. Learn from it. If anything, look at it with your crew and learn about, okay, what happened here? What can we do to make sure this doesn't happen to us? Talk about it internally. But to get behind a keyboard and just rip the brothers and sisters apart, that's anything but professional, and it drives me
destructive.
nuts.
It's very destructive.
Destructive.
It's not a unique problem to the fire service. It's the world today of
it is our world
social
today.
media. I mean,
if you're
in any other group that has a Facebook presence or a social media presence, it's all the same. Electricians cutting down other electricians or mechanics cutting down other mechanics.
You're right.
It's pervasive. It doesn't make it right, but it's we're certainly not unique.
That's why I like to say, as firefighters, let's hold ourselves to a higher standard.
Absolutely.
We should,
and try and tell our young people that as they come in, make a part of that orientation program, make a part of a regular reminder as the chief stands up at the monthly meeting or however you do it, newsletter. Hey, let's take a step back before we attack the brothers and sisters out there. It's just, and of course, then there's those that are just attacking the volunteers as scabs and hobbyists. I don't even engage them. I don't do any of that.
There's pages and groups on Facebook dedicated just to that. And
that irritates me to no end as a two-hatter.
Yeah, and that's professional, right?
Yeah, that's professional, all right.
Yeah, right. So I don't even engage people like that. My page is all just things that I think people can get something from, whether it's an article or an inspirational saying. I'm big on leadership. I think it's a huge, huge topic that people need. You're going to be an officer, administrative, or fireman. You never stop learning. There's so much you can do to make yourself better, and you got to learn to work with people. And so they can go to that page or my personal email. I have no problem giving it out. It's TAMerrill, MERRILL 63. Don't laugh, at AOL.com. My kids beat me up all the time. TAMerrill 63 at AOL.com. And my kids are teasing me, telling me that I got to do more social media. I need to do better with Instagram. I need to do better with the other platforms that are out there. I know I do.
It's underpriced attention.
I'm also working on a website. One of our volunteers, nice guy who works for a bank, and we got all different talents in our volunteer firehouse, right?
We sure do.
He's helping me put a web page together.
Perfect.
So we're getting there. We're getting there.
Very cool.
But I love talking to firefighters all the time. I'd love to do this again with you guys. Talk history, talk whatever, because let's celebrate being part of this great fire service.
We'll do another one on history. I think that's a great idea. And finally, one last question, because I know you got to go. What do you think the fire service needs to do to fix the shortage of volunteers?
Wow. That's a show on its own.
It is a loaded question.
It's quite a last question.
I think it's a loaded question.
Well, just a brief thing. I like to ask everybody that's on the show, just kind of their take on it.
So I'm one of the old guys at my firehouse. I'm 57 years old now, and I'm one of the old guards. But here's what I say. We can't be afraid to change. We can't be afraid to change. And I'll give you an example from my own fire department. We still make every member that joins has to, as much as I've been preaching different types of membership. In my department, we have not embraced that yet. You still have to be New York State certified as Firefighter 1 to pass your probation in my department.
Huh.
And it's cost us some members over the years.
Wow.
And as an older member, I'm like, why can't we? And again, it's a democracy. I'm not criticizing anyone. It's just our process. And as of now, we haven't changed. But why can't we accept members that maybe want to do administrative work or do EMS? You get the idea there, right?
Yeah.
So open our ranks for more support like that, not being afraid to change. I don't think the answer is doing away, less training. No. This is a job that can kill you, as you well know.
Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think training has to be there. We have to constantly train and know what we're doing. But and we got to make it a firehouse where leaders in that firehouse and senior members learn how to work with the different generations. Easier said than done.
For sure.
But it can be done. There's a lot of successful organizations out there that are able to do it. But here's the thing. Any leader, anyone listening that's in a leadership role, and I consider senior members leaders as well, look in the mirror and say, are you doing everything you can do to make yourself understand human nature and people and how to get people to work together and get along? Because, sorry, it's part of it. You've got to work at that.
It is. It's a people person type of industry, the civilians and the public, and then dealing with everything internally. So
internal and external customers.
And another thing is, the call volume, I don't know how it is where you are, it's skyrocketing in our area. And here's another thing we talk about on another show is dispatch, right? Nick, are you a dispatcher? Right?
Today's my last day, so tomorrow I will not be. But today, yes. The answer is yes.
Oh, you're done dispatching?
Yes, I'm ending my career today of 11 years, and I'm taking a new job selling Pierce fire trucks for the state of New Hampshire.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, my paid job is I'm a fire dispatcher. We have a central fire alarm office. We do fire and EMS only. It's a busy center. We dispatch the 3 towns and 2 villages. However, I've been there 25 years now, and the call volume is skyrocketing because what? People's dependence on us isn't going away. They depend on us for more and more.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we need to just be open to new ideas and how we're delivering that service. And one thing we did in our area, which helps, is we do what we call screening. This could come out the wrong way. I don't mean it to, but we have paid ambulance service in our town that is staged strategically, and they handle the BLS calls. We do not go on lift assist. We do not go on cut fingers. We do not go on flu-type calls unless there's a compelling reason.
Yep.
Someone's laying in a snowbank and it's 0 degrees out, we'll send fire because there's firefighters in every neighborhood. But that has helped cut the call volume down. We're still all running over 1,000 runs a year. But my department was just under 1,200 last year. We got one department in our town, which, by the way, my town is the town of Amherst, first-ring suburb of Buffalo. There's 10 volunteer departments in Amherst.
Wow.
And just about every one of them's at 1,000 runs a year.
Holy
wow.
We're
at about 1360, 1370 for our fire department in our town. We have another fire department in our town. We have 2 departments in our town. We're at 1360-ish. They're a little, just a hair under 1,000 on their side of town.
Oh, gotcha. Now I know I ran all over there with the with ideas on how to save it, but it just got to be open-minded. Yeah. I think we've got to be open-minded. And the 70s were great. The 60s were fantastic. Hey, again, we're history buffs. Love the old days. Love how we did things. Love those stories. But it's 2020, and we've got to recognize that those days aren't coming back. But we can still survive. We can still survive, and we can do things in our firehouse to portray a professional image, which can help get new members, and then keep them by embracing new ideas and being open-minded to how crazy life is today.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Perfect answer. I love it. That's a great perspective on it. Let's end it because I know you got to go somewhere. And I just want to say real quick that I appreciate you coming on the show, and time is valuable, and you spent some time, and we went back and forth on nailing down a date and time, and this actually worked out pretty well. So thank you, Tom, for coming on the show. And
I really appreciate the invite.
Absolutely. And thank you, Paul and Nick Hamel, for coming over and sitting in the cold basement once again to talk to Tom. And listeners, thank you. Time is valuable, and you guys are taking your time out of your day to listen to us and share our content and all that stuff. So thank you. We're going to have another show coming up on Wednesday, as we always do, and another one on Sunday, as we always do. So for now, everybody be safe, and we'll talk to you next time. Friends, please join the movement by sharing this podcast and sharing our social media accounts and visiting us at brotherhoodacademyradio.com.
Brotherhood Academy Radio podcast is brought to you by Salty Hook Media.